Welcome, Lisa Merton and Alan Dater. You brought some notes with you?
Yeah.
For Bill McKibben's final exam now that you're at Middlebury College?
I can't remember the numbers that I need to remember.
Okay.
So I have to write them down.
Yeah.
In case somebody asks.
Wow. Nobody's talking about this stuff.
Exactly. Does this work?
Yes. Can this be heard? Yes. I think.
Does this one work?
Yes. Yeah. Good. Well, let's start with how you came to this film, and then we're going to open it up to the audience too. But when you came to this idea for this film?
Let's see. I think it was the spring of 2015. We were talking with a funder who had helped us fund our previous film, which was about the Kenyan environmentalist Wangari Maathai, she was the first African woman and the first environmentalist to win the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004. And that was our last film. And she was a tree planter. Anyway, so these funders, we were talking about our next film, and we were talking about fragmentation, which is happening everywhere. In Vermont, as a matter of fact, that's one of our big problems, is fragmentation, and how animals were going to migrate north. And we had all these ideas about another film, and this woman said, "Have you heard about the biomass industry?" And we said, "No." She said, "Check it out." So we did, and we were just stunned, because we considered ourselves to be relatively well informed, and we didn't know anything about it. And that started the whole thing. We started researching. We went south first, and then we knew there was a plant in Burlington, another one in Reigate Mills, and so it went.
Now, just fragmentation, can you explain what that is?
Fragmentation is when forests are broken up. Mostly in Vermont, it's because of development, but sometimes it's because of cutting. But mostly in Vermont, it's because of development.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So somebody will build a house up on a mountain because they love the view, and then eventually there'll be other people that will build on that road, and that becomes sort of a community, and it becomes a place where the forest is fragmented.
Okay, so the forest needs critical mass, it needs continuity. There needs to be big forests.
There needs to be corridors. There need to be north-south corridors.
The animals, once the development takes place and there's a road or highway or something, then there's no longer, the animals no longer have that path that they were used to having for thousands of years, I guess. It's cut off, and so the wildlife tends to drop off. It doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
It can't thrive.
Right. Although the ticks are doing okay.
They are.
Yeah. They're.
Climate change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your initial thought was to look at the issue of fragmentation, and that led to a connection with the idea of biomass, and they sort of go hand in hand.
Well, we were also interested in what's called ecosystem services. In other words, what we get from the natural world that we don't really think about that much. Flood control, oxygen, carbon sequestration, all of these things that if we put a price on them, as somebody said in the film, Tom Wessel's, it would be billions and billions of dollars. And yet we're not so much thinking about those ecosystem services because we're degrading the environment everywhere rapidly. And those services, like in the southeastern U.S., when the bottomland hardwood forests are cut, that's their protection against flooding.
Right.
So
what surprises did you encounter? What discoveries did you make through the production of the film, in particular, that were compelling to you?
Well, the whole, there's two parts of it, right? There's the pellets that are made mostly in the southeast, mostly for export and sent overseas. And then there's the whole other part of it. There's the electrical generation that happens at these freestanding plants, which are also all over the United States. We have two in Vermont. There's the big one in Berlin, New Hampshire, and there's multiple other ones in New Hampshire, and there's a lot of them in Maine. They're all up, wherever there's forests, there's biomass plants. And so the question is, for us, was does it make sense to burn trees to produce electricity when it produces 50% more carbon dioxide than burning coal, and it's totally inefficient.
Right, because it probably takes a lot more wood to get the same amount of power as you would burning
Right.
coal.
Yeah,
which
it's
is
not
more
an
dense.
energy-dense fuel.
Right, which coal is, yeah.
You know, to answer your question, I think that the biggest surprise for us was that they could legislate in Europe and in this country science. That they just overlooked all the scientific research and declared that biomass was carbon neutral, that it wasn't harming the climate. And it just, you know, you can't believe that, you know, the legislators and the scientists, they're not listening to each other.
So it's another example of politicians essentially ignoring science, not truly making a good faith effort to understand the science before making the legislation.
Yeah, as Bas Eickhout in The Hague said, or where was he? In Brussels at the
Right.
European Parliament said, that biomass is carbon neutral, it's a pure political decision.
Mhm. And so you're saying that in the state of Vermont, we're generating electricity through wood chips in Burlington,
Reigate Mills,
Reigate,
yeah.
anyplace else?
Nope, we have 2 plants in
Uh-huh.
Vermont.
Okay. And in Burlington, is it part of the Burlington municipal system? Municipal
Yeah,
power
yeah,
system?
yeah, it is.
So it's the city of Burlington itself
Yeah.
which has made this commitment.
Yeah, and the thing is that Burlington, you know, there's I don't know, I can't remember if it's referred to in the film, but there's something called CHP, which is combined heat and power, which is what I believe is at Middlebury College. I think it's a cogeneration plant.
Mhm.
That's much more efficient. Why wouldn't you get as much, you know, as much energy as you can out of burning wood? Why would you settle for 25%? I mean, I know they built the plant in Burlington a long time ago, and they're talking about making it a cogen plant, but it's not happening, you know. So it just doesn't make sense to be producing that much carbon dioxide it's just such inefficiency.
Did you, in your research, come upon any information that made you say, aha, we could actually solve the question of carbon emission by this scenario in terms of energy?
In terms of energy?
In terms of energy, well, in terms of, you know, electrical power and heat, essentially, these are needs that the world has. And we know that there could be different patterns of settlement. You could go into a whole lot of things.
Right.
But what's the quickest gain for the maximum
Solar.
benefit?
Solar.
Is solar electricity.
Yeah, I mean, the photosynthetic efficiency of trees is 0.3 to 1.6%. Solar panels are like, what, 20% efficient, and they're moving, you know, they're getting better, 25%.
Mhm.
I mean, people say we can't do it with solar, but there's many people who also say that we can.
Well, they're doing it with solar.
Yeah.
There's large solar plants being installed because it's much more cost effective than building coal-fired or nuclear plants. So it's actually happening.
I mean, it comes down to carbon, it comes down to CO2, you know, it comes down to carbon emissions. It comes down to the biggest problem, the biggest issue we've ever faced as a species.
Right.
You know, I mean, I think about it all the time. I mean, I've lived in this state most of my life, and I've seen enormous changes in the weather. I'm sure you have
Sure,
too.
yeah.
You know, it rains here like it never used to rain. I mean, it's almost like monsoon rains. In southern Vermont, we've had, for the last 6 weeks, it's been raining. I mean, just astronomical amounts of rain. When there's wind, the trees fall over because the soil is so moist. If there's heavy winds, I mean, you see over and over again when you're walking in the woods, huge clumps of trees that have just like fallen over because there's too much water in the soil. Alan was digging lately 2 post holes in different places. And how far down was the water?
It's just about a foot below.
I mean, it's
the
just
surface.
incredible. It's never been like that in the 55 years I've lived here.
And at the same time, I understand that up in Burlington, there's been a drought
Right, yeah.
What
So-
the hell? You know?
It's pockets of, yes, of changeable weather and
Yeah.
sort of
Anyway.
tropical climate in the summer. I was remarking, that we showed a film the other day about a farm in Chelsea that included making maple syrup.
Yeah.
I mean, I made maple syrup the first several years I was in Vermont, and what was always one of the great pleasures was the very slow retreat of winter and the slow, gradual coming of spring. That was really exhilarating, you
Right.
know, and you know, the light changed, the temperature changed, the mornings were crisp, and then a little bit warm, you know, but now it tends to go very quickly. You know, there's a fast transition, often accompanied by rain and whatever. But now, a film that is specifically advocating, as this film is, marks some change for you guys. I mean, in terms of your work. I mean, you've always certainly had content that was consistent with your own beliefs, you know, but this is sort of a little bit of a call to action, and
It is.
what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, this film was a tough one for us to do because we really had to do the research to understand the complexity of the argument, and then as a lawyer, in presenting this case, you really have to get it right, and that's new for us. Almost all of the films we've done have been more about people's lives, often driven by an emotional connection, or that's a strong part of our films of people's lives. And so it was really hard for us to do it and to get it, and we hope we got it right. You know, but it was a departure for us.
Yeah, and there's no doubt we have an opinion. I mean,
Sure.
my father was German, and he was always a tree planter. When I was a kid, I planted trees with him. Then we met Wangari Maathai, you know, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for planting trees. I mean, she really won the prize because she recognized the connection between conflict and resources. She was an extraordinary woman, and we understood through her, like, what trees mean to people who live in places like Kenya. You know, trees mean life or death, you know, they mean the existence of water or no water. And so it just, you know, I'm kind of what can I say, I've got it in my genes, you know, I can't help it. I want to save the world.
There you go. Well,
Sorry, I might as well just be honest. Yeah.
give me a call when you got it done.
No, but I mean, I want to, you know, when I just feel like there's deceit in this that needs to be
Well, sure.
needs to be exposed, and the fact that we knew nothing about it and we thought we were well informed. You know, there's all sorts of other issues about forest management, and in Vermont we have tons of trees, and you know, sustainability and how you manage your forests, and we've been nailed by lots of people for that. But that's not what this is about. It's about looking what we can do as a species to mitigate the situation that we've gotten ourselves into.
Right.
And I really believe that trees, it's not just trees in the United States. I mean, Denmark, right? Denmark doesn't have any trees. They burn tons of biomass. Their trees are coming from Russia, from the taiga, from Madagascar, from Mozambique. You know, it's like, what?
Right. So.
Wait, I thought we stopped making energy from trees before the Industrial Revolution. What are we thinking?
Well, it's a commodity source that
Exactly.
can be controlled and profitably developed. And
Exactly.
unlike solar, once it's in, it just is sort of free.
Yeah,
Right.
and the
I mean,
infrastructure is there. I mean, you
Yeah.
could see that infrastructure in the UK. Trains and, you know, special stations and
Right.
special ships, and it's the
So-
multi-billion-dollar.
So one of the big problems you have is, well, you have corporate influence in politics. I mean, and corporate money in politics, and that's sort of, it's an issue. We just had a race in the primary for Peter Welch's seat in Congress.
Yeah.
And Dan Freilich's primary position. This guy's a, you know, doctor and
Yeah.
VA doctor and Navy captain, and he encountered a problem with the Democratic Party wouldn't give him any voter information, for one thing. And his issue is, he said, if Welch would agree to stop accepting corporate money, he would drop out of the race. you know.
I know,
I mean, if anybody doesn't need any money to run for president, it's Vermont politicians. I mean, the state is so small, and they're known so well, and incumbency is a huge factor in the state, you know, that to actually raise $1 million or $2 million or $3 million is like, I mean, you don't need, I mean, George Aiken, ran a campaign on $75 or something
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of
Yeah.
interesting. Yes, right here.
We all know that we learn a lot by following the money. And if we can understand what was said in the movie, that if the subsidies go away, the biomass industry will collapse immediately.
Right. And it's sort of subsidy
Subsidies
for
are paid
European
by
energy, too.
Those are taxpayers that are paying those subsidies.
That's us.
Whether that's the state, the federal government, or both, seems to me that that's how you solve the problem, by getting rid of the subsidies.
Well, Governor
Right.
Sununu in New Hampshire has just done that. He vetoed subsidies for biomass. And the legislature is trying to override his veto right now.
Are they still getting it from the federal government, though?
The money,
Subsidies.
subsidies,
From the taxpayers, the ratepayers.
yeah. So there's a vote on September 13th as to whether that veto is going to be overridden or not.
In the
It's-
state of New Hampshire.
Yep.
But is there a federal subsidy also to the biomass industry?
Yes, there is. Well, like
Yeah.
Burgess Biopower, they got, to start out, they got $100 million, you know?
Yeah, and so, and we look at the numbers there in terms of subsidy, but the irony being that some of it at least is US federal money subsidizing ultimately European power generation. You know,
It's-
so we can, you know,
Yeah.
was President Trump been helpful on this issue?
I was wondering do you know what your next project is going to be?
This
Or
is our
can you
project.
say or not?
This is our project. I mean, once you make a film, then you have to distribute it, right, Jay?
Right,
Yeah.
you live with it for a couple of years.
You live
at
with it for a
least.
couple of years, so that's what we're doing right now, is just trying to get it out. Yeah.
I've got two questions. One's related to the film and one's related to the science, I guess. The first one related to film is that guy who explained that he was managing his forest in such a way that it was productive and it was still being sustainable and everything.
Longleaf pine, yeah.
Did you consider going into detail at all in the film on how he was doing that? And did you have any raw footage of that and cut it out or not? And the second question relates to my previous understanding before I came to watch this movie was that the rigging behind the zero carbon thing was the idea you cut a tree down, it sits there on the ground for 100 years or 15, 20 years, whatever, and it slowly seeps off carbon in the atmosphere as it's decaying. But I guess even if that was true, when they burn it, they just slap a whole big batch of it into the atmosphere all at once. I guess, can you comment on those two things, please?
Okay, so the latter, yeah, it's instantaneous carbon emissions, right, when it's burned. Biogenic carbon, the guy from the pellet, whatever he was, the Pellet Association, he was saying that there's a difference between biogenic carbon and carbon that comes from burning trees. Well, as Mary Booth said, carbon is carbon. It doesn't, it doesn't matter. I mean, the difference is that, if something's rotting in the forest, like you said, it can take decades for a tree to rot, right? It's a slow process. It's an organic process. When you burn it, poof, it's up there immediately. And the tree that was cut is not sequestering carbon anymore. It's not holding that carbon. Now it's either on the ground or it's in the atmosphere, and it's in the atmosphere.
So there's a double deficit.
There's a double
We're both
deficit.
reducing our ability to absorb carbon, and we're producing more carbon at the same time.
Yeah. We're not removing carbon nearly as fast as, I think we're producing it twice as fast as we're removing it. What was the first part of your question?
It's about the guy who sort of sustainable.
Oh, we did have other footage, and part of the reason that we didn't include it is because longleaf pine has to be, what's it called? It has to be,
Burn.
they have to burn. It has to
They have to burn
have
the
fire
understory.
they have to burn the understory to reproduce, right? And we just didn't want to go into that whole thing. You know, but there's people in the South who are really against that because, you know, they don't like the smoke when they burn, even though it's over a very short period of time. But they're reaping the benefits from having these, you know, this incredible longleaf pine forest near them in terms of oxygen and, you know, coolness and quality of life, and yet they don't want that burning to take place. So in some ways, those forests are threatened just because of that. But he did, basically, they're looking to grow timber, you know, and so he's just waiting until he believes that the tree is at its maximum potential for the best timber that he can grow. I know there's lots of people from Vermont who've gone down to that guy in Georgia to look at those longleaf pine forests because of the way he manages them and what a great forester he is.
Yes, in the back row.
Thank you. I'd like to move away from the subject matter and ask about your choice to make what I would call, and I'm sure layman, a strict documentary versus what you admitted yourselves you typically do, which is having a more personal story. And this one, I would say you didn't. You know, you're very strict to your subject matter and the investigation of that. And was this a conscious decision, or is this just something that happened organically?
That's funny. The question was, you said earlier that, you know, this is more of an advocacy film. It's more of a, you know, it's a different film than we've ever made, which is true. And, you know, how did we decide to do that? And it's funny that you asked that because we saw the film Modified this morning, which is about GMOs and Monsanto and the whole genetic modification of our food. And the woman who made that film, Obe, I think her name is, she's Canadian. She's in the film. And I said, remember when we were talking about that, about me maybe being like the person who was going to go out and find out about this, and we just didn't think it was going to work. I don't know. We just
To make it more reflexive and
Yeah.
involve you personally.
Yeah. I sort of wanted to do it, and then I didn't want to do it.
Yeah, well, there's, you know,
We've
there's
never
an
really
aesthetic
made
choice.
we've never really made a film with either one of us in it.
I mean, there's some filmmakers that actually advocate that you should always do that. you
Yeah,
know,
I mean, you're
and,
doing it by what you choose to shoot anyway.
Uh-huh,
That
yeah.
actually wasn't my question.
Oh,
Believe it or not, it wasn't about
Sorry.
you being in the film.
Yeah.
It was about having a more of a personal story of someone that was
I get it.
used, you know, you used
A film that
to
addresses an
throughout
issue.
the film.
Yeah, we tried to find, I mean, the most personal story is probably the Michigan story. You know, that was because it was a community. We were looking for a kind of David and Goliath story in the Southeast, trying to find a community that had fought off one of these plants. And there were various stages of that going on. But we never found a story that would illuminate the whole story. And that, you know, was sad for us. We were trying to do that. Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Have you started traveling with this film extensively? Do you plan to? I mean, it's obviously a film that could play across the country, especially starting with these regions that you're dealing with,
Yeah.
but would probably flourish most if you were to actually be out with it to a certain extent.
We've done quite a lot of that. We did it in the Southeast, in Georgia and North Carolina. We're actually going to be showing it at the Global Climate Action Summit in San Francisco 2 nights in a row, September 12th and 13th. We have a half-hour version of it, which we're showing with a panel of experts afterwards, one of those
Great.
nights.
And do you have early response on sales to schools or advocacy organizations?
No, because we haven't done any
You haven't done that?
advertising.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Oh,
here.
no.
Technical question. Did you do comparisons between the forestry loss in the United States compared to the Amazonian basin?
Forestry loss in the United States compared to the Amazon basin.
And yes, Dana Smith and I think Bill Mumaw say that what's going on in the southeastern United States is 4 times what's going on in the Amazon.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hi. just wonder what's on the website at the end. I mean, I'm sure it's true what the guy in Belgium said, it's a political thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's also, it's the intersection of capitalism with our political system as the root of it. So in the solution to it, there needs to be obviously exposure that people recognize it's a problem. So what's on that site when it's about taking action? What are you doing about, beyond showing the film where you can, I assume you have a strategy, but what is on that website?
Well, there are a lot of organizations that we're partnering with that are on that website. We're not super good at social media, but we do have a Facebook page at Burn the Movie, where we talk about the screenings that we're doing, and we post articles, and we don't have a Twitter account because I just don't have the bandwidth to do it. It's mostly a place where there's resources on the site, but we want to put up more resources, like the comparison to a 50 megawatt solar array and how much acreage that takes compared to a 50 megawatt biomass plant and how many acres of forest needs to be cut. We're working on those figures. They're quite mind-blowing.
Yes, in the back.
Again, thank you. It was incredible effort. The question is the fallacy not addressed by the carbon accounting adjustment? Because I think, a lot of the business model, is based upon, being carbon neutral, and this being certified on the back of a carbon accounting assessment. This is done by third-party, agents. And with, this adjustment of the carbon accounting, should this business model not, be put to a halt?
They're not paying attention to the carbon accounting.
These are people like KPMG, PwC that are certifying at the moment the carbon neutrality. So I can't see from a liability perspective that any, trustworthy agent is going to sign off on, the carbon neutrality that's being, acclaimed by even the European politicians are, liable here.
So you're suggesting that the effort be made to require accountability from the people that are actually delivering the carbon accounting for Europe, and so if they were to take this out of the equation, it would eliminate the market for it.
It's on a global scale. So KPMG is doing it, PwC is doing it, EY is doing it. So these are people who are certifying on the back of biomass. If the numbers nobly or erroneously, I think they're at fault, and they could be held, liable.
Well, NRDC, there's a lot of organizations that are trying to figure out how to stop this. Bill Moomaw, Mary Booth, all of the people in this film went to the European Union before they had their last vote on the 2020-2030 package to try to change minds, and it didn't pass by very much. It passed by very few votes in the European Union, the fact that it's carbon neutral, and they're still working out the details. So a lawsuit would be good.
Well, maybe filmmakers should start going to law school.
Yeah.
So they can make and then, yes. I think we're very close to time. Maybe just in the back, right here, yes.
There's a point that I don't recall being made in the film. Correct me if I missed it. But that is that the carbon that the trees release when burned is carbon that's already in the atmosphere, as opposed compared to carbon that's been buried in the ground, fossil fuels from a million years ago, and then we take it out of the ground and put it into the atmosphere. Did I miss that point? Did you address it in the movie?
You're saying that the tree constitutes carbon in the atmosphere regardless, because sooner or later it's going to be carbonize and make...
The carbon in the tree that's being sequestered by the tree is already in the atmosphere, which is different from carbon which is buried in the ground from millions of years ago, removed from the atmosphere, that is, we are taking back out and putting back in the atmosphere.
Right. I think their argument was that when the tree is burned for energy, it's a very fast release, which would otherwise release over a very long period of time.
But it's still carbon that was in the atmosphere already. I didn't catch that.
It's not in that.
Yeah, because that's how the tree grew. It's absorbing the carbon that's in the atmosphere. So I'm just
Yeah, but
wondering,
then-
was that purposeful that you left out that point?
The tree is creating oxygen for us to
Sure.
breathe.
Yeah, I didn't.
So it's-
No, we didn't purposefully leave out anything.
Okay. I think that's just, it opens you up a little bit to some folks that might challenge you on that. In terms of the accounting, it may change the accounting a little bit. Not that it makes up for the wing of what's being done, but it does change the accounting a little bit because it is carbon that's just being recycled in the atmosphere, into the trees, into the ground, back in the atmosphere, as opposed to taking stored carbon
Okay,
that was
okay.
removed from the atmosphere out and putting it back. That's the only.
Okay.
Right, the whole film is based on the premise that we need to do something about climate change. That's what it's all about. And if you're cutting trees and releasing more carbon, then you're making a mistake. You're accelerating climate change because it's happening right now. It's not happening 75 years from now. Who knows what will happen then. So if you can find ways of capturing the carbon, whether, we're not against loggers going in and cutting for wood for building or furniture or paper.
Or even wood heat, which most of us use in Vermont,
Anyway, any way you can find to hold the carbon is good. Any way you start burning it and releasing it quickly is a bad idea. Even wood heat, I'm afraid.
How about wooden buses for public transportation? We could use some more of those.
Anyway.
One last question, guy in the back.
Last question.
So I thought the film was really well done, but I believe that you're missing one big component. My industry, my business is sustainable forestry. And where was Sustainable Biomass Partnership? Where was FSC? Where was SFI? There are major certification programs out there about sustainable forestry.
There are major certification organizations, and a lot of the major certification organizations, several of them are being questioned as to what their certification is based on. And we can have a conversation about it later on, but there are several organizations that are challenging FSI, is that what it's called? FSC, I mean.
SFI, FSC, PPFC, Sustainable Biomass Partnership.
Yeah.
Program now.
Yeah. It's not about how people manage forests, as I said earlier on. And we're not against quote-unquote sustainable forestry, but you could read somebody like George Werthner, and he would say, and I don't know if you know who he is or not,
Yeah.
he says there is no such thing as sustainable forestry from an ecological point of view. So it depends where you're looking, what point of view you're looking, what lens you're looking through. I'm not against cutting down trees. I am a tree hugger, and I'm proud to be a tree hugger, but I'm not against cutting down trees. I'm not against timber. I'm just against the whole notion of releasing this amount of carbon into the atmosphere in such an inefficient way when it could be done in another way. We could be creating that energy in another way. So.
Come on
All
up
right,
after.
thank you very much, and thank you
We'll
for
do it
Lisa and Alan.
I just want to say thank you to the film festival and to
Yeah,
Jay
that's
and to
great.
all the volunteers and all the people that have made this work, because it worked and it's been wonderful, and we thank you.
It's really good. Thank you.